Welcome to Good Revenue. I'm Neetha Bidway. This week, we're going to talk about how the Pentagon just became a venture capitalist, trade wars, antitrust evasion, AI data accuracy, and finally, whether or not companies are in fact automating the right things when it comes to AI. As always, you can find links to everything we talk about in the show notes. And if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button. Thanks for joining us. The U.S. military is now one of the biggest venture capitalists in the country. Rare earths are an essential input for advanced technology, including for the military. And as you might know, China supplies 70% of what we need, which creates a strategic vulnerability for us. So the Pentagon has just paid $400 million for a 15% stake in MP Materials. They have the only rare earth mine in the US. DoD will become the largest shareholder of the company, and the goal of this partnership is to build a secure domestic supply chain, according to the Pentagon. In addition, in order to attract private investment, this deal involves long-term purchase commitments on the part of DoD, and there are also price floors that will be implemented. So it's super interesting because this really does seem like a shift in industrial policy. And I think it's worth keeping in mind some of the historical context as we consider this. During World War II and the Cold War, the U.S. nationalized shipyards, uranium mines, and other assets. In 2008, the Treasury Department took stakes in banks, insurance companies, and automakers. U.S. taxpayers are still the owners of the U.S. Postal Service, Amtrak, Fannie Mae, and Freddie Mac. So there is a history of U.S. taxpayer involvement in the private sector, but it does seem like the deals are getting more creative in this new administration. A recent example is the golden share, which came out of the Nippon U.S. Steel deal. It provides U.S. government with a veto power over key decisions. So that could include moving the headquarters from Pittsburgh, closing plants, or having a foreign sale. The deal also required that the leadership and board of U.S. Steel remain American. And it also said that taxpayers wouldn't receive dividends or standard shareholder voting rights as part of the agreement. In contrast with U.S. Steel, we also wanted to just explore TikTok for a minute. Now, if you are a fan of TikTok and you've been tracking this, you might have strong feelings on this subject. But I think it's worth remembering that the sale of TikTok was required by law by the U.S. Congress more than a year ago. It's a deal that hasn't been enforced by this administration. Instead, the administration has been trying to find a U.S. buyer, maybe an investor, maybe a consortium headed by a company like Oracle. There's a lot of different evolutions in this deal making over the span of this year. But what is interesting is that TikTok has just announced that they are building a new app for the American market that involves a new algorithm, and data will remain here in the US instead of being routed to China. So we'll just leave you with this thought. Seems like we're heading into a new era of industrial policy, and we are very curious to see where it goes from here. U.S. tariffs have hit their highest level in more than a century. We were previously at levels not seen since the Great Depression, and now we're at a level that was not seen since 1910. Trade policy has been shifting all around us for this entire year. And the general goal and strategy has seemingly been to try to isolate China and to protect select domestic industries. On July 12th, the White House announced new tariffs of 30% against the EU and Mexico, which are expected to go into effect on August 1st. According to the budget model, the average tariff is now at 20.6%. The economic effect of all of this is that the average household is expected to lose $2,400 this year due to tariffs. Again, that's coming out of the budget model. The cost of living is going to increase 1.8%. And across industries, you're seeing a range of different results. Manufacturing has actually grown 2.6%. That's because imports have become more expensive, while several other sectors are losing. Construction is shrinking 4.1%. Agriculture will contract 0.8%. That's mostly due to foreign retaliation. Mining falls 1.5%, and advanced manufacturing is also dropping almost 3%, and that's because of supply chain exposure. Across the board, as we are trying to box China out and to rebalance our trading relationship with China, the rest of the world is rebuilding trade routes around us. Specifically, the EU, as well as Canada, Southeast Asia, and other top trading partners are trying to see if they can establish a new trading world order that doesn't necessarily include the United States. At the same time, our latest news is that the AI chip export controls that we've talked about a little bit in recent episodes about a month ago seem to be back on the table as the United States is leaning on countries like Malaysia to try to limit the access of the Chinese to advanced technology. No doubt we'll have more updates for you on trade, but one important thing to keep in mind and that we'll leave you with is that the full impact of all of these tariffs hasn't hit the market yet. We have seen some industries like clothes and cars that have been affected and are already announcing price increases, but the wider effect on the economy and on markets hasn't hit and is likely to. Antitrust evasion could break the startup ecosystem. As big firms have been avoiding increased regulatory scrutiny about M&A, they're finding more and more creative ways to get around regulators. Google just spent $2.4 billion to license tech from AI coding startup Windsurf. That deal involved their CEO and some key employees who will now become Google employees. Now, this is all coming on the heels of OpenAI's failed talks to acquire this startup back in April. OpenAI was planning to spend $3 billion to acquire Windsurf, and the talks collapsed because of regulatory scrutiny, and also there were some conflicts because of OpenAI's deal with Microsoft. So Google is the big beneficiary here. They are getting AI coding technology, a really senior team with a lot of talent, all without triggering official antitrust alarms or acquisition delays. This follows in the trend of tech giants acquiring assets and IP and talent instead of whole companies. And we went through a breakdown of this in a recent episode that we'll link to here. Windsurf had, until just today, a really different outcome. So there are 250 employees that are still left at Windsurf. And just today, Cognition announced that they would be acquiring Windsurf's IP, product, trademark, brand, and their team. This is good news for employees who will get full financial participation and accelerated vesting for their options. The key question here, though, is it's good that this is going to work out for the Windsurf team because heading into the weekend, it looked like they were going to be on an island. But the real question is, if this kind of deal becomes the norm, what does it mean for the startup ecosystem? And will people and companies be willing to take the same risks? Or is this going to chill the innovation that we typically see in smaller, more aggressive firms? AI systems are being manipulated in ways we'll likely never see. There are 3 AI and cybersecurity threats that we wanted to talk through today that should really be on your radar. The first one has to do with academic fraud, which might be a little bit surprising, but I think you'll see why the wider implications are concerning to me. So Nikkei Asia just reported that they found some researchers have been gaming AI peer review tools. They studied 44 papers and found that 18 of them from 11 different countries have been using hidden prompts, white fonts, tiny, tiny print, invisible text. These are kind of shady SEO tactics, if that's a world you have any familiarity with. And the problem is that not only are these tactics elevating weaker research papers, but ChatGPT and Gemini appear to have recommended flawed papers based on this secret AI direction. The researchers don't seem to think like that this is a bad thing, but I really feel like if we can't rely on AI accuracy, what's the point of public LLMs? The second story has to do with overt internet poisoning. And this is from the American Sunlight Project. They have done some research into the Pravda network. This is a group of more than 100 pro-Russia websites that have been actively creating millions of fake articles with the distinct and specific goal of distorting information. And unfortunately, they've been quite successful. According to the Sunlight Project, OpenAI's ChatGPT-4 model repeated Pravda propaganda 71.4% of the time. Their prior model repeated propaganda 28.6% of the time. So it appears like the problem is getting worse. Both models actually knew that Pravda was an unreliable source, but they still repeated the information coming from the source. And if you followed other AI stories we've talked about, this isn't entirely surprising, given that AI doesn't seem to have any autonomous sense of what is confidential or important. We've got a whole bunch of different studies we've seen that would seemingly belie the idea that AI is actually thinking. And obviously there's the famous Apple study as well, if you want to dive deeper into that question. The last story on this topic has to do with systemic cybersecurity vulnerabilities. So MIT just reported that the National Vulnerability Database stopped accepting new entries back in February 2024. In addition, the Common Vulnerabilities and Exposures Program has been facing a crisis when it comes to its contract. The bottom line is that AI is already being used to manipulate the information we receive. It runs the news, our research, and some of our decision-making already. And given how many organizations plan to adopt and incorporate AI, it seems like these attacks are just foundationally going to threaten the accuracy and trust in the system. And now we know we can't even rely on the catalog of systemic vulnerabilities that the government used to track for us. So across the board, I think that experts are right to warn us that the surface area of our human language is actually the attack vector that we really need to worry about. Companies have been automating the wrong things if you talk to employees. Stanford just released a study, and it covers 1,500 employees across 104 different job types. And what they found is that workers want AI to be used for repetitive, time-consuming tasks, things like scheduling, data entry, and the correction of errors. Some of the concerns expressed by the workforce include 45% of respondents doubt the accuracy and reliability of AI. 45.2% want an equal partnership between humans and AI. 35.6% want human oversight at critical points. And finally, 23% of respondents fear job loss. The disconnect is that 40% of current AI deployments target areas that workers don't want automated. And so I think the question for tech firms and AI firms, as well as for executives and leaders supporting these projects, is, are we aligning our AI investments with what the workforce really wants and with the best opportunities to actually optimize our organizations? As always, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate having you, and we will see you back here soon. Thanks for listening. If you liked what you heard, leave us a review, subscribe to the show, or check out another episode. We appreciate your support.